after months of zero news, this is what movies are made of.
This is what movies is made of.
This is what movies
This is what movies is made of.
The NBA has come back full force with the New York Knicks acquiring Karl Anthony Towns from Minnesota for Julius Randle and Donte DiVincenzo. Can you imagine my surprise when I went to sleep to take a nap last night at 7 p.m. on a Friday night and I wake up at 8 a.m. the next day on a Saturday and I open my phone, all these notifications, and I look that this trade happened while I was asleep. The first trade in the NBA in what feels like forever. It has been such a dead off season. No news, nothing really interesting to talk about. All of a sudden, this trade comes out, biggest trade, and I'm full on asleep for 13 hours, bro. I was very well rested, and now I am back to make this video. And I mean, the initial reaction was this felt kind of like a fair trade. What's funny is you saw Minnesota fans and Knicks fans, both of them, being mad that their team did this, as well as fans from both sides like kind of happy for this trade. Like it felt like everyone was on every single side for this trade, which really shows I think it is a very fair trade. It's either win-win depending on how much you like the players, or lose-lose depending on how much you don't like the players. Personally, myself, I think Karl Anthony Towns and Julius Randle and Donte are all very good players. However, KAT and Randle both have some not huge flaws, but they do have flaws that you can't ignore. And honestly, I think it's a fair trade between both teams. Now, it's important to put into context why this trade happened. Neither players have really ever asked out of a trade. I mean, there's been some Randle noise and whatnot, but the real reason for this trade is financially. Both teams gain out of this. The Minnesota Timberwolves, ever since they got Rudy Gobert, this trade was inevitable because they are a far too expensive team. They are already over the second apron, which is a very debilitating place to be. Like when you're over the second apron in terms of money, multiple years in a row, your team just gets taxed so heavily. Like your first round picks goes to the bottom of the first round no matter what. Your flexibility for what you can do financially is like basically nil. Like you can't do anything when your team is over the cap. And KAT has a huge deal. His deal starting this year, $49 million, and then it's going to progress 53, 57, 61 million over the next 4 years. With Rudy Gobert, whose deal is coming to a close soon, he's already making 43. Ant already signed a max that's going to be 42, 45, 48, 52, 55 million. Jaden McDaniels had a 5-year deal. Naz Reid, his contract is going to be up potentially this upcoming offseason. Just the amount of money that they have put into this team is just too much. Like the cap would be so financially bad for them if they kept this team around. And ever since the second apron came in, we've kind of looked at the Timberwolves like, yeah, they're going to have to move on from KAT. You can't trade Gobert because he's your defense and you traded so much for him. You traded so many first round picks for him. There's no point trading away Anthony Edwards. Jaden McDaniels, Naz Reid, those guys are great pieces around him. Mike Conley as well. But those aren't, like, you're not going to get a lot for him. KAT always felt like, he's not super old yet. He's only 20 years old. He's an all-star, all-NBA type caliber player. He's been, in Minnesota his entire career, and he's dealt with a lot on and off the court. And, he's been a champion about it throughout. But, he has his limits, and like financially, this was the only person they could trade and get something back. And they get a 2-for-1. They get Randle, who can play his position, as well as Donte DiVincenzo, a great 3-and-D player. On the Knicks' point of view, Randle was up for a contract extension that hasn't had really any talks behind. And, Donte, his deal is actually really decent for them. Like his deal, what is this? This is only like, 11, and 12 over the next 3 years. Like that's a really cheap deal for Minnesota to get now. And I believe they say $40 million just for trading KAT away for these two guys, even though they only make $8 less million than them. I don't understand like this whole money thing. Like it's really super crazy, but they say $40 million just for trading away KAT and getting these two guys back. But for New York, They also are in like a cap hell. They're very close to being over the second apron after this trade. However, if they were to keep Randle, the amount of money that they would be over the cap would just be insane. And now you're basically getting some financial stability in terms of who your core will be. Like, nobody's really up for a contract until like 2 off seasons from now. So from that point of view, it kind of makes sense. I don't know. The whole money thing behind this trade is a lot, and it's crazy how much money these players make. But financially, that's the real core reason for this trade. So now let's talk about from the Knicks' point of view. Obviously, Mitchell Robinson out as their center until at least January. And, people are thinking like, yeah, you could put Julius Randle as a center. You could stick with Precious Achiuwa and see what you got as the center position. Now with Karl Anthony Towns in the center spot, their starting lineup: Jalen Brunson, Josh Hart, OG Anunoby, Mikal Bridges, Karl Anthony Towns. That's a great starting and closing lineup, I think. The amount of spacing in that lineup is really good. Obviously, OG and Mikal are both great shooters. KAT, one of the best in the league. And then Josh Hart, if he shoots even half as good as he did in the postseason, I mean, that's a great, reliable 3-point shooter. Defensively, the wings, OG, Mikal are amazing. It'll be interesting to see how Thibodeau and the Knicks play KAT as the center position, because obviously he needs to be the rim protector, but he's not that good as the rim protector. I think the 2-man game between Brunson and Karl Anthony Towns is going to be amazing. Pick and roll, pick and pop. Both of them can attack a mismatch, whether it be a big on Brunson or, KAT backing down a small point guard or whatever. Both of them can attack mismatches pretty well. And yeah, like I said, Jalen Brunson attacking in the paint with the most space possible. I mean, he's just going to feast. However, a pretty major negative, I think, for this team is the fact that Jalen Brunson, while having this much space and this much, room to attack the paint, he's going to have a lot of the ball handling duties. I'm not expecting OG or Mikal or Josh Hart to be like bringing the ball up that much. I mean, Mikal can do it. He did it with the Nets. Josh Hart can do it, but neither of them are anywhere close to a secondary ball handler. And then KAT, I don't really want him bringing up the ball. However, in like a point where like Mikal gets the ball or KAT gets the ball and they need to create a shot for themselves, they can do that. It's just like, I think Jalen Brunson is just going to be having a lot of the ball handling duties. And outside of Miles McBride, their perimeter depth is not that high. Like, you're really banking on, it's just Brunson and Miles McBride. You also have Cameron Payne. And that's kind of it in terms of point guard. Like maybe Landry Shamet, who they also have, or one of their rookies. But outside of that, it's kind of hard to see who else will be handling the ball other than Brunson, which, he can handle these big minutes. He has, but when it comes to playoff time, he's going to play even bigger minutes. And that's just going to be a question to see how they, operate. As well, defensively, obviously, OG and Mikal is the best wing duo in the league, I believe, defensively. Josh Hart, great defender as well. Again, how will Towns operate as the rim protector behind them? He's not terrible, but he's not that good. And then, once Mitchell Robinson gets back, that's going to be really interesting, because I think a lineup of him and KAT, and then I guess OG, Mikal, and Brunson, that's probably going to be good. I don't know. I think that lineup, it might be interesting. For the Wolves' positives, obviously money-wise, they're saving some tax money, and with this trade feeling inevitable, in terms of flexibility, getting a 2-for-1 is great. I think defensively, they're not going to drop off at all. I think Randle is a great defender to play the power forward position. He's a physical big body in a lineup with Gobert and McDaniels. I mean, he complements defensively that lineup pretty well. And, when it comes to like going against a Jokic, KAT did a great job alongside Gobert with handling that. I think Randle, while not 7 foot, can be as physical as KAT could be. And I don't think he's a slouch defensively, so I'm not too worried about that. I'm more worried offensively, because this team will be a bit worse. When I saw what people thought about this trade online, a lot of people said that Minnesota got fleeced, New York fleeced them, Minnesota is going to have to deal with Randle ISOs and whatever, which, they will. But the big thing is that this starting lineup is a brick. Like, you got Mike Conley, Anthony Edwards, Jaden McDaniels, Julius Randle, and Rudy Gobert. The reason that KAT and Gobert could play well together on this team with a McDaniels is because of how good a three-point shooter KAT is. One of the best big man three-point shooters the league has ever seen. Now switching him out for Randle, who is nowhere near as good as him. He has had one good three-point shooting season. What is that? He had like 41% three-point shooting season where he shot 5 a game, made 2.3. But that was all the way back in 2021. Since then, his last full season, not counting last season because he only played 46 games, in 22-23, he shot, 34% on 8 attempts? Not too bad, not too good. But so, that's definitely going to be an issue. However, Dante, super three-point shooter. I mean, he was like lighting it up in the playoffs, 40% three-point shooter. I don't know where he's going to fit in this starting lineup per se. But yeah, I mean, offensively, three-point shooting wise, that will be a struggle for this team. The ability of Anthony Edwards to get to the rim is going to be, I believe, a little bit harder now than it was last season with KAT out there instead. And, you're really banking on him to improve as a playmaker and an overall scorer in the way he scores, which I think obviously he can do. He's still super young. He's not even 23, or he is 23 right now. So, still super young player. So while their spacing might not be that good, Anthony Edwards gonna have to carry this team offensively a little bit. I'm not saying like Randle can't shoot, but him and McDaniels have a reputation of not being the greatest shooters. Like, teams are not going to respect them that much unless they come out shooting lights out. They'll not be able to get that kind of respect that KAT would in terms of three-point shooting. However, Randle can still generate his own offense. He's going to have those ISOs, which, you may or may not love, you may or may not think are very good. I think that they're okay. While three-point shooting in their main starting lineup will still likely be an issue, I think Minnesota has a lot of different lineup options in any given game. Mike Conley, of course, Naz Reid, big man off the bench, 6th man of the year, three-point shooter as a big man. They got their rookie Rob Dillingham, 19 years old. What do you have with him? They have Joe Ingles, which I forgot about. Nickeil Alexander-Walker, obviously Ant and Jaden McDaniels and Gobert and Randle now and Dante. Like, that's a really solid 8-man rotation. 8 or 9, I don't know how many that was. 8 or 9-man rotation. Like, those are good players. And Coach Finch is a great coach. So while, I think there might be a gelling period as there was with Towns and Gobert, I think Minnesota will still be a pretty good team this year. Overall, this is a pretty lateral move for both teams. Like, there's some obvious positives financially and, in terms of talent. New York thinks they got more talent. In terms of money, Minnesota saved them a lot of grief in terms of the second apron, and now they get more depth. They're a bit more flexible now in what lineups they can put out there, and they're not losing KAT for nothing. They're getting 2 really good starting players. And New York, they didn't have a center. They knew that Randle, contract wise, they don't know what he wanted or whatever. Now they just get that out of the way. They got KAT's contract. They got their team who they've seen make a run, and they think that KAT is the guy for them. Honestly, it is like a B+ move for both of them. Like, I can't really say a winner until we see both teams play. I'm very excited to see these teams play against each other. I think they're playing relatively early in the season as well, which is super exciting. I'm just so excited for the NBA season now. Finally, some moves with preseason coming up and training camp coming up. There's going to be a lot more NBA news and content from me, so watch out for that.